To join in the Rugby League conversation, go to rlfans.com/forums and sign up today. Hello everyone, my name is Rob, welcome to Kinetic Rugby League and welcome to the Super League Review, Round 9. Let's get started. So starting things off with the Salford Red Devils at home to the Castleford Tigers, starting with the losing team, which was the Tigers. Their spine included Niall Evalds, Gareth Widdop, Jacob Miller and Paul McShane. The try scorer was Greg Eden and goal scorer was Gareth Widdop. Now a couple of comments from that game. So first of all, there's a few slight positives in there. Well, the main one being Jordan Turner. Worked hard and got some good meters. Although there were way too many errors from Castleford, gifted a lot of field position, and there were some silly penalties in there, which they'll need to cut out in the future. It looks like the combination in the halves just isn't really working anymore between Widdop and Miller, if it was even working to begin with. On paper, it should really work for me, but it just hasn't done. I think Castleford are in a position right now where they're kind of lucky that Wakefield are worse. That's not a great position to be in. It is kind of similar to Warrington Wolves last season in that Wolves were the second worst team. They were kind of lucky that Toulouse was a lot worse. Actually, they weren't even that far off. You know, if Wakefield get on a run, I think the Tigers are in trouble. I have seen some improvements. They are limiting the points that they concede, and they look like being able to put points on the board, which is less than I can say for Wakefield. So they have made those slight improvements. More points for, less points against. On paper, Widdop and Miller should work. Like, it should just work. And with a hooker like Paul McShane and a fullback like Niall Evalds, and even players like Greg Eden, it just, on paper, it should work, but it's just kind of all over the place at the minute. Moving on to the Salford Red Devils, their spine included Ryan Briley, Brodie Croft, Mark Sneed and Andy Ackers. Try scorers were Shane Wright and Brodie Croft, and the goal scorer was Mark Sneed with 3. So this wasn't one of Salford's best performances this season. I think most people would agree. It was a little bit sloppy, a little bit chaotic, but this is kind of the thing when a lot of people say, like, the thing between a great team or a good team and a bad team is that the great/good teams can pull out wins even when they're playing bad. And kind of what that felt like for Salford. Now, when you've got players like Ryan Briley, who at the minute is, I'd say, capable of walking into most Super League teams. So, let's say a team like Wigan, their typical fullback is Jay Field. You know, of course, he's injured at the minute, but you wouldn't replace Jay Field with Ryan Briley, but if you had to through injury, you wouldn't complain. So he would kind of walk into any team. Same with replacing Matt Duffy at Warrington or Arthur Romano at Catalans, Will Price at Huddersfield, that kind of thing. So if you had him in your team, there's a really good chance, A, you're going to score, and B, you're going to get a really calm and sort of collected player. So what he offers Salford is really special, and the kind of things that Brodie Croft and Mark Sneed can do in terms of controlling a game really helped Salford in the long run. The kicking game was a little bit off though, especially in the first half, but second half was a lot better. So yeah, it was kind of scrappy, but I think the quality of Salford really sort of helped them shine through. I have said multiple times on this channel, on their best day, Salford is the best team in the league. I do still kind of agree with that, but the consistency is really sort of letting them down at the minute. I still think they'll be fine for playoffs, but they've got to kind of figure this out because it could be detrimental if they don't kind of figure out what they want to do. But I'm sure they'll figure it out. So moving on to Huddersfield Giants at home to Catalans Dragons, starting with the losing team, which was the Dragons. Spine included Arthur Romano, Adam Kieran, Cesar Rouge and Benjamin Garcia. Try scorers were Tom Johnston and Mathieu Laguerre, and the goal scorer was Adam Kieran with 3. So with Catalans at the minute, I don't know what's going on with their squad in terms of May and Pearce. I don't know if they're just injured. They might be. But even with the players that do consistently play, which is always seems to be Artur Morg and Adam Kieran, they keep getting moved about. Cesar Rouge has been in and out of the team. Benjamin Garcia's a lock, not a hooker. But He's an experienced player. I'm sure he could do a decent enough job. They've got McElroy and Alrix da Costa at hooker. Neither of them were available. I don't know if they were picked or dropped. I don't know. But that roster is all over the place at the minute. They need some stability. I think regardless of any situation, I think what I would do from this point on is, bring some kids through if you need to. But I think from this point on, Artur Morg has got to stay at fullback. Adam Kieran has got to stay in the halves. And if you can, if he did have an injury, fair enough. But Cesar Rouge, I think, has looked decent and actually connected well with Artur Morg making the dummy runs behind earlier in the season. And stats-wise, McElroy never seems to have good meters. It's either maybe decent-ish tackling stats with barely any meters, or barely any meters with barely any tackles. So I would look to just Alrix da Costa starting and McElroy coming in sort of whenever. But it's just, they've got to get some stability with the spine, and that is going to mess them up. And if these star players in May and Pearce are just not cutting it, or are consistently going to be injured, you've got to move them out and strengthen other areas. Because, I think they still look strong and can keep teams out for the most part. But all this instability is just going to be so detrimental and is going to ruin their chances of not even a top 4 finish, a playoff finish, which I could see the Dragons losing, genuinely. So moving on to the Huddersfield Giants, their spine included Will Price, Jake Connor, Tui Lolohea and Nathan Peets. Try scorers were Kevin Nagama, Harvey Lovett and Sam Halsall with 2, and their goal scorer was Jake Connor with 5. Their work rate in defence was really good this week against Catalans. The Dragons have had a decent forward pack for a couple of games and looked like they did well to sort of slow them down this week. The fluidity in attack certainly helped them open up Catalans multiple times, and they have actually found some consistency with the spine. They have also been a team that's had to mix and match a little bit as well. The one constant I like with that team is that Will Price has been effective. Not carrying, but he's still as effective and pushes beyond what's expected of a single player, if that makes sense. So whether he's at fullback, he's still able to open teams up. If he's in the halves, exactly the same situation. Nathan Peets has been a constant at number 9, I believe, aside from maybe 1 or 2 games where Ash Golding has started. Tui Lolohea plays some of his best rugby when he's not under pressure, when he's calm. When the team's on top. Sometimes you want players that can actually turn the tide of games and not have to rely on everyone else sort of doing the business and then he sort of steps in. But he looks comfortable. And with Jake Connor now coming back into the team, who is actually a really talented, skillful fullback, centre, halfback, they've got so many options, but it's about keeping that stability, which they look to have done. But yeah, I'm really liking what Huddersfield's doing at the minute. I predicted them to finish 2nd at the start of the season. I still think it's possible. Could they beat Wigan? I think later on in the season, I think they can definitely do it. We'll have to see whether Wigan missing J Field's an issue, but I think 2nd place is definitely possible for Huddersfield. Moving on to Hull Kingston Rovers at home to St Helens, starting with the losing team, St Helens. Their spine included Jack Wellesby, Johnny Lomax, Lewis Dodd and James Roby. Try scorers were Joey Lussick and Johnny Lomax, and goal scorer was Mark Percival with 3. Now, Saints have been missing a handful of players, but the creative elements to the team still remains the same. Wellesby, Lomax, Dodd and Roby. So on that department, in terms of creating chances, they haven't really got any excuses. They've still had a good handful of regulars in the forwards as well. So I would say that the excuses in comparison to last season's team are completely fair. But we now know that the team this season is vulnerable and is lacking something. The key difference between last season's team and this season's team is Paul Wellens. Now, I have seen some St Helens fans it feels maybe 70-30 of the split, 70 in favour of keeping him, but there's a very large minority that are now looking to kind of move him on. It doesn't really, based on the success that they've had the last couple of years, this doesn't feel right for St Helens. But a key example, Darryl Powell. Look how he did with Warrington last season, look how he is currently doing this season. It's a big difference. So time is a key factor. Maybe the kind of style he wants to play or is trying to play doesn't suit the actual team that's there. And maybe he can build a good squad in the future. Other teams might have just figured out how they play. That could be another thing. And they're trying to play the same way and everyone else has just figured it out. The quality is there, but they're just maybe lacking a bit of pace. And in terms of the defensive side, Makinson still plays regularly, but they have, I think it's Benison, I think is his name. And sometimes they have T. Ritson playing, both very young players. So teams might be looking to attack those players when they're on as vulnerabilities, because defensively their positioning might be off. Their experience in reacting to certain situations might be off, and their judgment. So that could be one area that is a way for St. Helens to get broken down very easily. But I think they'll still be playoff contenders. I don't think there's anything to necessarily worry about. I see them being mid-table at worst, like just missing out by 1 or 2 places, but Saints will be fighting for playoffs at the end of the year, I'm pretty sure of that. So moving on to Hull Kingston Rovers, their spine included Lachlan Coote, Mikey Lewis, Jordan Abdul and Matt Parcell. Try scorers were Jez Litton, Lachlan Coote and Mikey Lewis with 2, and the goal scorer was Lachlan Coote with 5. Really good performance from a young lad in Corey Hall. I believe it was his debut from what I understand. The defence worked really hard to keep out St Helens limited to so few points. What I would say, and my description of Hull Kingston Rovers looks to be the same every week, is that the execution isn't quick, but it's precise. So it doesn't look like they spread the ball very quickly, but they attack specific gaps, they look at specific players to draw in, and their passes are very precise, which allows them to open teams up. So if you are lacking pace, the precision is what kind of makes up for it, and they seem to be doing that really well. And they seem to have a lot of chemistry. When they're in the off-the-cuff moments, and I talk about those a lot, when they're in the off-the-cuff moments, they seem to be able to handle it really well. The chemistry's there. They know how they want to support players. They know where they need to be. They know what teammates are going to do. And from the get-go, Jordan Abdul has really been controlling things. And Mikey Lewis, week by week, has become more and more effective, more and more dangerous, more and more creative, and I don't know how many assists he's got, but he's starting to get more tries to his name in the last couple of weeks. So he himself is becoming a constant threat. And if you've got a number 6 that knows how to penetrate the line, you're in trouble if you're on the other side of the ball. So, and you've got players like Lachlan Coote that can kind of run things from fullback if needed. So you've got a really sort of experienced and lively spine there. Players like Matt Parcell in there as well, who's a really strong player that doesn't really get talked about a lot. But Hull Kingston Rovers have been looking brilliant this season. There are still vulnerabilities there. Some weeks they're not at their best, and that's going to happen with a lot of teams. But playoffs is 100% on the cards for Hull Kingston Rovers, and the turnaround from last season is great to see. So well done to them. Moving on to Leeds Rhinos at home versus Hull FC. Starting with the losing team, Hull FC. Their spine included Davy Litton, Ben McNamara, Joe Lovadua and Danny Houghton. Try scorers were Davy Litton and Carlos Tumavave, and the goal scorer was Ben McNamara. So individually, they look all over the place. As a team, they look all over the place. They just don't seem to be able to do anything right. There are too many poor tackle attempts. There's a lack of urgency and there's a lack of organisation with that team as well. With the ball and without the ball. They have their moments in attack, but those moments are few and far between. You're missing players like Tex Hoy, even though he has had his ups and downs this season. He looks like one of the more creative players. And to not have him is a big miss, and to not have Jake Clifford, even though he's had his ups and downs, mostly ups I'd say, he's a big miss as well. I would say that they are firmly in a relegation fight. Now, they might be a little bit like Castleford in which they have enough on paper to kind of make the difference, but something's got to give somewhere. I feel like there needs to be some kind of change. If they're able to bring somebody in, that would be huge. Whether they have the ability to do that, I don't know, under their current salary cap, or do they, let somebody go to bring someone in? I don't know. Or are they going to make a change to the coaching staff? I would trust somebody like Tony Smith to get these things right, but it's just not going well for them at the minute. And at the start of the season, it looked like players like Tex Hoy, Jake Truman, who hasn't even featured yet, Jake Clifford, and Brad Dwyer would be a huge change and would be extremely influential in the creative department. But I don't know. I don't know what the problem is. Maybe there's an expert out there that can tell me, but I would say that they are in the relegation fight with Wakefield and Castleford at this point. Moving on to Leeds Rhinos, their spine included Richie Myler, Blake Austin, Aidan Caesar and Jared O'Connor. Try scorers were Reece Martin, Mikolaj Oledzki, Ash Hanley with 2, Tom Holroyd and James McDonnell, and the goal scorer was Reece Martin with 3. What I like about Leeds last couple of weeks is they've been spreading the ball really well. They don't look robotic. They look like there's some fluidity, like there's a bit of freedom to kind of show individual quality. Blake Austin has been huge the last couple of weeks. So, best players have been stepping up. Nene McDonald is a real threat, and I don't think a lot of people have spoken about him. Reece Martin, the thing that he was known for last season was just his conversion rate. But this season he's been breaking the line, getting a lot of meters, and just being a threat in sometimes having to play in the centre position. So he's having a really good season. But the forwards have dominated in a couple of games as well, and that's helped them sort of lay a platform. They struggled early on with making meters. They weren't able to get good field position, but now the forwards have been stepping up, being effective, and it's great to see from them because we know what they were like in their heyday with Maguire, Burrow, Sinfield, Peacock, all those guys. And for a little while they've been nowhere near that. Last season they started to make a lot of people look at them as real contenders, and then suddenly they're in the grand final. They didn't have enough to do it against Saints, which was understandable, but they've got a real good thing going at the Rhinos at the minute. So can they get back to that kind of success? Maybe not yet, but I would say based on the roster that they've got and how they are capable of playing, I don't see why they can't be in a semi-final scrap at the end of the season. I could definitely see it with Leeds. They're just going to smooth some things out, but keep going on the path that they're on at the minute, and I'm sure they'll definitely be there at the end of the season. Moving on to Warrington Wolves at home versus Wigan Warriors, starting with the losing team Warrington Wolves. Spine included Matt Duffy, George Williams, Josh Drinkwater and Danny Walker. Try scorers Matty Nicholson, and goal scorer was Stefan Ratchford. So, my opinion on Warrington Wolves as a Wire fan, my description will be a bit more in-depth, and my criticism will be more in-depth. First of all, what a shambles. What an utter shambles. There's a few sort of ways of looking at this, but I'll try and break it down the best way possible. First of all, way too many mistakes. Way too many. If we just cut a lot of those out, we don't give Wigan field position, and we don't have to defend on our own try line for loads of time during the game. This seems to be a regular occurrence with one player in particular, and that is Peter Metaltia. I would love to know if there is a clause in his contract to which he doesn't get paid unless he drops the ball. This was a criticism I had of him last season, and all throughout last season actually, and it still persists this season. It occurs too much. If it's the odd game here or there, once every 4 or 5 games, you can kind of let it go, I guess. But when it's multiple times, nearly in back-to-back weeks every week, enough is enough. And I cannot wait for Connor Wrench to take his spot in this team. The kicking game was non-existent. Now I'm going to make a bold claim here, which I believe is 100% true. George Williams is world-class in most areas. I think people would agree that in at least some areas he's world-class. Like short kicking game, people would say he's one of the best in the league. And his running game, people would say is at least good at like the absolute worst. I can confidently say his open field kicking game might be one of the worst I have ever seen. He did it a ton of times last season where he just received the ball, look at the backfield, and the ball would go directly into the hands of one of the players in the back line. Directly to them. There is no effective kicking game from that guy whatsoever. And it pains me because we've probably paid him a lot of money in his new contract. And he is a world-class player. But to not know to kick the ball into the open space is ridiculous. And another thing with Drinkwater, who, by the way, I was under the impression was supposed to be our calm amongst the storm. This is the perfect game for him to be that. His kicking game was non-existent. I don't know what was going on with him. And the problem is, because he plays on the right and he's left-footed, it doesn't seem to be an issue with George Williams, but his positioning, he's always kind of like putting himself on weird angles and under pressure when he's trying to kick the ball in open play. So it's a little bit weird, but Danny Walker had 2 kicks from dummy half, and they were probably the best kicks in the game. And they actually put us in a position to pin back Wigan. Danny Walker had the best kicks of the game. Ridiculous. There was plenty of attempts at Wigan, but it lacked pace and like ruthlessness. Like we see it with Hull Kingston Rovers. They play with precision, fair enough, not pace. But you want to get to a next level. Teams like Salford can do it, and Wigan can do it. So I think the thing that we've probably learned from this game is that there were some attacking plays that Wigan did, which we hadn't seen before. And also, we need to be more ruthless in attack. The pace that we play with needs to increase massively. Now, there are issues with, a lack of forwards available. We're sort of running thin at the moment, and that's fine. So, all of that considered, only conceding 13 points with a really heavily depleted squad isn't so bad. But everything else needs serious work. Rant over. Moving on to Wigan Warriors, their spine included Bevan French, Joe Shorrocks, Harry Smith and Sam Powell. Try scorers were Jake Wardle and Brad O'Neill, and their goal scorer was Harry Smith with 2, and he also had a drop goal as well. Now, Wigan controlled the game extremely well. Now, Joe Shorrocks has kind of been thrown into the number 6 role. He didn't really do anything. A lot of what I saw was him running to the right, and then I think it was Willie Iser that he'd just kind of offload the ball to, and he'd make the run in behind. That's all I recall him doing. That's not me to have a jab at Wigan because we lost. That's just an observation that I think is correct. I may have just missed a lot of good stuff he did. However, to get onto the positive on the flip side, is that Harry Smith did a fantastic job of controlling the game by himself. He's a sensational player. Absolutely brilliant. Easily top 5 in the league right now. Possibly more like top 3, but just to play it safe, let's say top 5. There were some things, as I said, that Wigan did that just we haven't seen this season. And the first try that they scored, and the way that it came about was, I don't recall seeing Wigan doing anything like that. It's a lot of kind of flowing runs from behind or from scrums. I'd never seen them play that kind of direct pass just straight across. I've not seen that from them before this season. And it just kind of caught us out. I had sort of a great view of it, and it just sort of caught me out. How on earth has that just happened? But another thing they did, and that stemmed specifically from Harry Smith, was putting Warrington's back line under pressure. Thulis was always under pressure. So was Russell and Minikin. I think Minikin played. Pretty sure he did. And Ashton and Dufty. Constantly under pressure. Kicking game was brilliant. Game management was brilliant. Ruthlessness with the ball. The pace that they played with is just at a different level. And the fact that they were missing Field is a huge blessing for us. But the thing is, if Joe Sharks can learn to be, like, sort of develop his own game and be effective, then they're going to look really, really dangerous. I'd say just keep that spine that they've got now. Don't look to put French in there and get someone else at fullback. If you want to try one of the kids from the academy at number 6, by all means, go for it. But Joe Sharks, let him settle into that role, let him get comfortable with it, and then when, Field comes back in, or even Cade Cust, then you'll sort of be smooth sailing from there. But I think this kind of indicates on paper that Wigan are the best team in the league, because of we've kind of seen some flaws with Warrington so far this season, but Wigan certainly do have their vulnerabilities because they have lost some games as well, but their ability to control the game is insane, and Harry Smith is doing a fantastic job of that. So I'm not sure how old he is. I think he's really young. I'm not 100% sure, but in terms of the future of English halfbacks, Harry Smith and George Williams, 6 and 7 for England in the next World Cup. I have no complaints over that. Moving on to Wakefield Trinity at home versus Leigh Leopards. Starting with Wakefield Trinity, their spine included Will Dagger, Morgan Smith, Mason Lino and Liam Hood. There were no try scorers or goal scorers from Trinity. Now, normally what I do is make points on each team and I sort of go through them, make these points. So, looking at the points that are made for Wakefield Trinity, I don't really know what happened there. I thought I wrote something down. So, let's try that again. So, talking about some of the points from Wakefield Trinity, I don't get it. I don't really know. Like, what am I supposed to say about population of Wakefield? I've got absolutely nothing to say. So moving on to the Leigh Leopards, their spine included Gareth O'Brien, Ben Reynolds, Lachlan Lamb and Edwin Ipape. Try scorers were Gareth O'Brien, Ben Reynolds, Lachlan Lamb, Josh Chandler with 2 and Joe Mellor. And the goal scorer was Ben Reynolds with 4. Leigh Leopards are playing with a lot of confidence at the moment. They sort of know exactly what their roles are. They know where everyone's going to be. They know how they want to play. But they don't look like they're stuck into a system. They've got some freedom to play with some individual splashes. And it also looks like they've got used to the pace of the league. And I thought when they came into the league and played Salford in round 1, it was like they were kind of fighting with like everything, and it was going to take it out of them to like do that and repeat it each week. But that's not the case. And they've really, like, maybe the first couple of weeks it was like that, but they're so used to and comfortable with the pace of the league now that they just look like they've been here for a long time, which is great to see. They are, my team's, I guess, local rivals, but not Catalans Dragons, apparently, but local rivals. But it's actually great to see that they've come into the league. I mean, I'd be happy for anybody to be able to, stay up in their first season, because we get a lot of, new teams going down straight away, which is unfortunate. But to see them sustain like they are is brilliant. Everyone knows what they're supposed to do. In the off-the-cuff moments, they look brilliant, a little bit like Hull Kingston Rovers. That chemistry's there. There's a lot of urgency for players to be in support and to like work for each other. There's like a common goal. It's like they are still the underdogs of the league. They're the new team, regardless of whether, Wakefield's at the bottom or you've got Castleford and Hull not doing well. I think in their mind, maybe they're still, we've got the chip on our shoulder to stay up. And now that they're kind of pushing in the playoff area, I think maybe that shift is going to change from we're just going to try and stay up to you've got to recognise that we're here. We're in this position because we earned it, and we're beating teams that people didn't think we were going to beat before the season started. So And the fact that they held a team to 0 and put 32 points up is quality from them. Really liking what Leigh's doing. Really happy for them. They got some stability in the spine as well. Lachlan Lamb is a fantastic player. It'd be good to make sure that he doesn't get snatched up by somebody else that's got a lot of money to throw at him. So, I'd love to have him at Warrington, absolutely. But my advice to Leigh is, even if Warrington offer a lot of money, say no, because he is going to be so important to their future. So that's going to be it for this video. If you have any thoughts on any of the matches from round 9, let me know in the comments. If you want to watch the full highlights, they're in the description, as well as the social media accounts that you can follow. But that's going to be it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.